Alright, let's talk about compendiums, and I'm actually going to start off by talking really quickly about playlists. This tab is where we create playlists, create folders, and all of that. I talked about in an earlier video that I don't use playlists because I have players with different audio settings, so I'm just going to mention that for the purpose of reference. But with that said, let's move on to the compendiums. You'll notice that I have a lot of compendiums that are very, very full, and I actually have a folder, a module called compendium folders that splits all of these into folders. And you'll notice that it tells me what type of things these are. So like these are macros. So I can be like, okay, this goes in my macro folder. And you'll notice that that folder disappears when there's nothing in that. But I can know my actors, and you'll see the kinds of actors. And compendiums are a little bit different than like your actor folder. So this is my folder of monsters imported from D&D Beyond using the D&D Beyond importer, and it has a search field. So let's say I wanted to find a cat. I could find a cat in here, and I can drag this out from here. If you do that and head over to your actors directory, you'll notice that that creates a different actor each time. So if I do that again, I'll end up with two cats, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a little bit inconvenient if you have a bunch of copies of cat in your actors folder. So you can't certainly do that. Dragging it out will import it. If you remove an actor, you'll notice that these are fine because they're not tied to this attribute sheet. But if these were linked to, if these had this link actor data connected, they would break terribly. So you'll notice that I can delete those actors without breaking everything. But the proper way, in my opinion, to do this is to import the entry. It will pop up. You'll notice that it's here, and then I can move it into an appropriate folder. And then forget about it forever. And then the next time I need that creature, I don't need to open up my compendium again. I can go to my creatures folder and drag out my cat like I would drag out any other actor. Back to more compendium folder stuff. I'm not going to go through all these actor folders. You'll notice that some of these tell you where they're from. If it's from D&D 5e, if you install the D&D 5e module system, I should say, it will have all of these creatures available. And these are from the 5e SRD, so these are ready to use. And you can just import them the same way by dragging them onto the map or by right-click importing them. Items are a little bit different. You probably saw me in the, if you watched it, the actors video dragging things out. So let's open up this bandits sheet, and I actually didn't import those. If I open up D&D Beyond's items, I can drag things out to this. So, for example, if I wanted to give it Battle Axe +3, I could scroll through all these items, or I could just search if I weren't stubborn. And you'll notice that automatically puts it in the attack section, which is where it belongs on a monster /NPC stat sheet. On a player stat sheet, it would go to the inventory as long as you're on the right tab. And I can click this, and you'll notice that it automatically has the Battle Axe properties. He has a +0 to his strength mod, +2 to his proficiency mod, and then +3 from the Battle Axe +3. And that's all pre-configured to work automatically. So that is how you would import an item to a character sheet. And there are other things here too. For example, there are from the SRD monster features. So if I wanted this to be a Dragonborn bandit, I could give him this acid breath feature. Probably would need to modify it a little bit because I grabbed it off of a dragon stat block apparently because it's 12d8 acid damage. But I go in here and change that, and I'm not going to go into the details of modifying these. I touched on this a little bit in my actors video, but basically you can set these to scale differently. For example, like this, you'll notice that the description has a set DC, but if I roll it off of this creature's stat block, it is going to say it's a different DC because it is scaling off of that creature's stat block. But we're not going to talk about that too much more. It's kind of more of an advanced thing. So if you're interested in that, you can play around with that. But that is a little bit. Journal entries. If you have modules that have journal entries, they'll often have things here, and some of those are reference. there's also this SRD folder that has the rules, so that is very useful if you're trying to reference something. Let's say, how does cover work again in 5e? You can go into this folder and open that, and that way you don't have to import into your journals and clutter up your journals. You can read things from the compendium, or if you wanted to, if you were referencing it a lot, you could. And you can also show this to players the same way as journals in your journal folder. So, if your players are like, that's all cover work, you can be like, no, I know it is. That happens more often than I would like to admit when I'm directly looking at something and someone's like, no, that's not how it works. Macros, you're really not going to have a lot of macros unless you are using modules, so I'm not going to cover macros. It's just worth knowing that you can store them in compendiums. Play this for music. Roll tables, I talked about roll tables a little bit. These are the ones that I have imported in D&D Beyond. These don't actually scrape out D&D Beyond, they're from various classes, items, so on and so forth that get imported. And the roll tables import as part of importing those characters or monsters or things like that. So it's not an exhaustive list of all things, but for example, you'll see this roll table here. And if you watched my roll table video, you would have seen me modify this roll table. And then the most useful, if you have a lot of modules, is scenes. You'll notice that this is very cluttered. I've actually been installing a lot of scenes lately because they're no longer necessary. Scenes will only show up in your compendium if you've activated the module. I'm not going to talk about activating modules and stuff because that is more of a server admin thing in my situation. And since I'm mostly doing this video to teach DMs on my server, that's not something that's particularly relevant. But this is, I rarely use this anymore. I mostly use the Molnet scenes feature. It kind of obsoleted this because this can even find things in your compendiums. So there's no reason to go into your compendiums for all of those. You'll notice, I believe you do have to have the compendiums activated for this to have them show up. I'm not 100% certain on that, but you'll notice that there's a pretty good correspondence between the two. The ones that are in orange are cloud stored, so they don't show up. But you definitely can still go through here to grab those modules out, or to grab those scenes out. If you do so, they show up like this, and then you can click on them. You can't actually change the configuration here, they're locked, but you can click this import button to import them, or you can also right-click and select import. And that will run us through the compendium. Just some real quick housekeeping as we wrap everything up. A reminder about the system the setting configurations menu. If players are having issues, have them turn off some of these user settings, and I have the module that does show which are per user. So these you can turn off various features that allow you to perhaps improve performance if you're having trouble. Some of these are global settings or GM only settings. And there are also system settings that do the same thing for your particular system. I'm using the 5th edition D&D system, so that's the settings that I have. And there are also module settings as well. I have a lot of modules activated right now, so you'll see a lot of items. I'm not going to go through all of those, but it is worth noting that you can toggle settings here. And some of these are per user, so if you have per user settings here, you might want to direct players there if they're having issues with say if they were having issues with better roofs, you could have them turn on performance mode, and that would improve how the system runs for them. And so it's worth, especially if you have that module coming through here and making sure that you know which your players can turn off. So I recommend using that module. I've forgotten the name of it. I said I was going to talk about managed modules, but here we are anyway. You'll notice the modules I have active. It's a lot. Probably too many. They impact performance some when you have too many modules open. I'm trying to remember. DF settings clarity is the module that lets you see all of those. DF architect is also important. DF architect is the one that lets me show walls on other layers and stuff, so notice that my walls are still visible because of that toggle. So there's certainly many things you can do there. Edit world, user management, those are all a little bit more of a DM admin thing than just running sessions and preparing. We will go to user management real quick because it is important for a DM. If you have new users, you'll notice that we have several DMs and several players. And so, for example, these DMs have the Game Master role. If you want to create an additional user, you can do so. It will create it at the bottom of the list. You can name the player, set a password, and then you can also set whether they have any special permissions or if they have no permissions. So if you have a player who you had in your group who did something that they should not have done and they're in trouble, you can give them no permissions. Or you can also set a player to be a trusted player, even an assistant GM, or even a game master. We have several game masters, and they can log in simultaneously and cooperate, though with latency that can sometimes cause disaster. But you can also configure permissions, so you can generally configure permissions on who has the ability to use certain things. So you might not want your players to be able to upload files to your server, especially if, like me, you're using cloud hosting service. And then you can also log back in here to your stuff. And if I log in as my user, for example, I will see Foundry very differently. But that should wrap things up for us as we've traveled through most of the options of Foundry. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to answer them if I can, but I think this should generally cover what you need to know to get started. So if there are any other questions, you're certainly welcome to get in touch with me. I run the Silver Circle along with Leroy, which is a Westmarch server that you can find if you find me on D&D Beyond, Squire Z. I have a link to it in the description, so you can pop in there and ask questions. Or you can join us for sessions. But you'll notice as I log in as a player that I have no vision here because I have no tokens in this scene. But I can see the chat log, and I can see, for example, that roll table that I set up. So that is all for now, and I hope you enjoy using Foundry.